Hello, it's Chright here to introduce a really off-meta rogue build that runs two core skills together seamlessly. It even runs Preparation, the least used of the three specializations. To start, I figured you want to see that this video is not a clickbait and that the build works, so I'm going to play some gameplay footage across various nightmare levels as I talk about some basic things. I also don't suggest skipping through this video because I will talk about many key points that are already tested and alternative replacements for both skills and gear. One thing to note is that the gameplay here is using relatively weak gear, and my lazy ass is also missing 8 Paragon points from Renown and even more from my levels. This is the version of the build that I am running now to farm nightmare dungeons 10 to 20 levels higher than me, just because it's more fun than me fighting stuff 3 levels higher. I am moving from a more farming build towards trying to nightmare push when I finish my gearing and Paragon. I will talk about skill replacements in the skill tree section if you just want to play the build for a relaxing farm. Anyways, from the gameplay footage, you can see that we tear through small packs of mobs quickly, even without running Shadow Imbuement instead of Poison Imbuement. With the use of Shadow Clone, which nearly doubles our DPS output, we also easily tear through even elite packs at higher nightmare levels. Bosses are also deleted within seconds, and since we're running 2 core skills, our Shadow Clone refreshes really quickly if you're constantly in combat, and with better gear setup, you can reach having no Shadow Clone downtime. The footage on screen is with me missing a key amulet as I don't have cooldown reduction on my amulet. I also only have one good Edge Masters, which I didn't imprint over my Disobedience, because for some reason, I can't find any Disobedience above 35% base. For the final build, I would imprint Edge Masters on the necklace, which will increase my DPS output by 20 to 30%, as Edge Masters is multiplicative, and we are able to maintain a high resource pool. Oh, also, the elixirs in these clips are resistance elixirs, just in case you thought they're buffs. Alright, so why am I running 2 core skills despite a costly skill point investment? We essentially require 7 more skill points into our second core skill versus other builds. You actually have my 9th Grasp of Shadow drop to thank for this build. Because it rolled so well, I decided to try and use this fairly unpopular unique, which I ended up ditching in the end, although it is a good alternative without perfect gloves. Grasp of Shadow is not popular for a good reason. Not only is it missing one of the most important stats you can get on your gloves, critical strike rate, but it is also very geared towards Shadow Clone. And since its base is upgrading all core skills by 2 levels, at max upgrade, it increases all your core skill levels by 3, as opposed to increasing the core skill level of a single skill by 4. And the meta is very much single core skill focused to optimize damage. I explored using Shadow Clones, Preparation, and core skills, as running more than 1 core skill is one way to make this glove worth more. Let's start by taking a look at Rapid Fire, one of our 2 core skills. Rapid Fire is probably the skill most people jump at when thinking about the Preparation specialization, thanks to its energy generation. However, the issue with Rapid Fire is actually its slow animation. At no attack speed bonus with a crossbow, you take roughly 5 seconds to fire 5 rapid fire and cancel the last one with a dodge. Comparatively, Barrage takes less than 4 seconds even on a slightly delayed cancel. Interesting enough though, if you watch both Barrage and Rapid Fire's animation, you see the after image-like animation for both of them. Those of you who have discovered this probably also discovered that you can cancel both Rapid Fire and Barrage with a dodge right after casting them. In fact, They both cancel in 0.3 seconds if you're only casting once. However, you must dodge cancel after every shot, which is fairly impossible to maintain over longer engagements. You will also have to take into account the dodge's frames. But messing around with multiple core skills led me to an incredible discovery. That's right, I just fired 5 barrages and 5 rapid fires in under 6 seconds, also with no attack speed bonuses on the crossbow. I do this by overlapping the rapid fires animation right after barrages. Take note that the opposite does not work. This technique does not work if you cast rapid fire first and then barrage second, as this is not really an animation cancel, but more of an animation overlap. Overlapping rapid fire over barrage is way quicker than firing 5 individual barrages followed by 5 rapid fires. In fact, it is faster than getting over 60% attack speed, even if I take the slower data points. This means that by using my twin core overlapping technique, you obtained a legendary aspect stronger than imprinting the accelerating aspect on your two-hander weapon. And we're not done yet. We are also running the accelerating aspect on our crossbow. Why does this matter, you ask? Well, it's because the animation overlap I did with 0 attack speed on my crossbow was actually very clumsy and clunky. With other sources of attack speed, it is much smoother to animation overlap your marksman core skills. Here are the 5-hit attacks with 56% attack speed. The rapid fire and barrage checks out, as you expect it to. But overlapping the core skills actually produces roughly a 75% increase in attack speed versus casting 5 rapid fires plus 5 barrages with a 56% attack speed bonus, instead of the 60% increase in attack speed when we don't have any attack speed bonus. With the accelerating aspect slotted on your crossbow, you're basically getting 3 accelerating aspects from the overlapping technique, as the animation turns smoother and your double core skill approaches the animation time needed for just the rapid fire. Essentially speaking, you're casting 2 core skills with nearly only the time it takes to cast 1. Furthermore, Barrage also makes up for rapid fire's weakness of not being able to spread out your imbuments against multiple targets. Alright, hopefully I've convinced you that this video is worth watching. Next, let's introduce the skills I run for this build. We start with 2 points in puncture, just to get to the core skills. Here, we max out Barrage, and we choose Improved Barrage over Advanced Barrage, as this is one of the ways we maintain vulnerability on our targets after the exploit glyph expires. This is not negotiable. We also max out our other core skill, Rapid Fire. Rapid Fire is the main way people are trying to run the preparation specialization, by utilizing Rapid Fire's energy recovery, and not investing into energy cost reduction on the amulet and boots. However, we are doing something different. We are running energy cost reduction as we're spamming 2 core skills at an extremely fast pace. We run Improved Rapid Fire in order to not burn through our energy. Combined with Barrage, this build refreshes preparation faster than any other rogue build in game, despite building cost reduction, as Rapid Fire would nearly be free. Sturdy is just a good passive for close damage reduction. Those of you who've played far enough into the difficult content know how important damage reduction is. Siphoning Strikes is the rogue's strongest sustain passive. I pretty much max this out regardless of the build I play. It's just too good to pass up, as close range is actually fairly far. With the number of bullets we're firing every second thanks to our overlapping technique, we recover more health with this passive than pure Barrage or Rapid Fire builds. Weapon Mastery is pretty self-explanatory. We're on the crossbow for the full time, so it's basically 15% multiplicative bonus for our critical damage. A strong offensive passive. Next, Concussive boosts our crit rate by 12% when we knock down an opponent. Even though we are not running Poison Trap on this build, we are running Trick Attacks, which knocks down dazed enemies, and Rapid Gambits also enables us to refresh our dodges quicker through Daze. Our main source of Daze comes from the Mangler's aspect, which procs really often due to our sheer number of attacks. We don't slot Dark Shroud, but we get Dark Shroud from the Umbros aspect, which is a strong aspect for ranged rogues. Both countering or subverting Dark Shroud works. I'll leave it up to you to decide for yourself. Concealment is a great way for us to escape and calm down in the middle of a heated battle, target an aura resist mob in the middle of a pack, and recover energy in case we mess up our energy management. We choose Subverting to help us with vulnerability uptime, in case we needed to dodge a lot and can't maintain Barrage's vulnerability. As an extra note, Concealment can be swapped for Shadow Step. Either Methodical or Discipline has their own merit, but since this build has really high single target damage, CCing a boss is not needed. Therefore, I suggest Discipline Shadow Step for the lower cooldown. It works great as an alternative to Concealment, because it also helps you target aura resist mobs and has Unstoppable. However, you do lose out on the 40 energy regeneration in case you mess up. I don't suggest using Shadow Step unless you have your full energy kit down. Anyways, to continue, we run Agile as we do pop cooldown skills quite often, especially with Preparation. This works better than Debilitating Toxins for our build, because we don't run Poison Trap for this one, and we can't maintain as high of a poison uptime. Having high dodge also works well with Dark Shroud for damage reduction, since dodging a move won't consume your Dark Shroud. Exploit and Malice are both powerful offensive passives with their multiplicative nature, just great picks in general. I run Poison Imbuement now because I'm probably going to be working towards a Nightmare pushing build. It helps with gear rolls as well since you can roll damage reduction versus poison enemies, which won't be a dead stat. If you're just using this build to purely farm stuff within 10 levels, or maybe even 20 when you're more geared at level 100, I would definitely suggest swapping over to Shadow Imbuement, which will make the fairly fast AoE farming even faster. Since we don't really do much non-physical damage, blended Shadow Imbuement is the way to go. But honestly, you can forego this passive, because if you're running Shadow Imbue, it is likely that the mobs won't survive for long anyway. Next, Code Imbuement is actually quite key for this build, as we only need one stat point for it to do its job. Since we run the Umbral aspect, and applying Chill counts as a crowd control, Code Imbuement helps greatly with resource sustain. We can also roll crit damage with imbued skills for our weapons as an alternative, as we run 2 Imbuements in addition to Preparation. Furthermore, since both Barrage and Rapid Fire hits multiple times, stacking Chill on a target easily leads to immediately freezing them, which can help with annoying elites. We don't need to upgrade Code Imbuement, as the upgrades are fairly lackluster. 30% chance unlucky hit to apply Vulnerable, not that useful. We have guaranteed ways to maintain Vulnerable. 20% chance unlucky hit to freeze enemies. Not a high chance if we factor in the base lucky hit chance of our core skills. Plus, stacking Chill already guarantees freezing the enemy in front of us. Code Imbued skills deal 20% more damage to crowd-controlled enemies. Since we don't have other guaranteed long-lasting sources of crowd control, and this costs 2 skill points to reach, not really great either. For our ultimate, fully upgrade Shadow Clone. Shadow Clone gives us 5 seconds of Unstoppable. If you have the full build down with Preparation, you actually have a very high Shadow Clone uptime. This translates to higher Unstoppable uptime, which is why I have rubies in my gear, because combined with Concealment, we can break most CCs. Yes, I know rubies only apply to base HP. You can also choose to use Topaz too, which is definitely better if you're crowd controlled. Unfortunately, Diablo 4's gem system sucks, and we don't have any other option besides these two. Innervation to help with resource generation in general, and Aftermath to make sure you have energy to spam after shadow cloning. I think one level in Aftermath is actually enough with your other resource pieces completed, especially while running Concealment. I definitely run 2 levels here if you're swapping Concealment to Shadow Step to make sure we maintain our Edge Masters. And we run Precision for our key passive, as we shoot more core marksman skills than any other build. Out of the other key passives, Momentum, CQC, and Exposure also just don't work, and I think Victimized is currently too weak anyway. Next, let's take a look at my pathetic gear when I recorded the footage, and what you actually want to be aiming for. This helmet is actually not bad. Obviously, swap to Shadow Imbue if you want to run Shadow Imbuement for farming instead. Instead of crowd control duration though, I'd rather have more armor. Ranks of Frost Imbuement are also okay as a last resort, as they increase the chill applied, which makes it easier to freeze enemies. The cheese aspect helps with damage reduction. Next, you want to be aiming for a 4 defensive stat chest piece if you're thinking about nightmare pushing. However, if you're just farming, having an offensive stat isn't an issue. I'm running the Enshrouding aspect as a replacement for Disobedience, because I can't get a good Disobedience, and my only Disobedience remains on my necklace. This means that I'm losing out on quite a lot of damage because I don't have the Edge Masters on my necklace. Although, I did just get a new necklace, granted it's fully offensive. But yes, I still lack a Disobedience to use the new necklace, as not having the strongest defensive aspect is just rough. I do have some gameplay of me trying the new necklace though, which shows off its much higher DPS. Even for higher Nightmare levels, I would still put Edge Masters on our necklace, because we are lacking offensive slots, and Edge Masters suits us very well. Our base armor is high enough that Disobedience on the chest piece would do its job. Energy cost reduction on the necklace is crucial for maintaining our energy spending, and I would really like to have cooldown reduction as well for the Perma Shadow Clone. As for why I'm running Imbuement skill CD on the final version of the necklace instead of another damage reduction, it is because Imbuement not only helps us do more damage, it also maintains better crowd control uptime for our cheese aspect, and faster Frost Imbuement is also more energy from our Umbral aspect. It also helps maintain our 12% dodge bonus from our passive. Now for the gloves. I've tested 3 options. These are my Fist of Fate, Grasp of Shadow, and Legendary gloves. The Fist of Fate actually does quite well with damage, thanks to its unique aspect. But the main point is definitely its CC potential from lucky hits. Remember, we have passives that combo with Daze, and Umbral aspect gives us more energy with this glove as well. However, the unique aspect is also its downfall. Because of its widely varying damage range, it makes farming in AoE less smooth, because you can happen to roll a low sight on a single arrow that might have one-shotted a weak mob, making wave clears less consistent without using Shadow Imbue. This is our weaker option, but it's useful if you don't have the other energy generation pieces down. The Grasp of Shadows aspect is actually not too terrible for us. However, it is delayed, so it doesn't do much if you're just farming weak content. And even in more difficult content, the glove as a whole still loses slightly versus a perfect legendary glove in my opinion. Depending on your crit rate and damage, even at 9% crit chance, the crit contributes to around 10 to 20% more damage versus not having crit on gloves. Furthermore, it also helps other parts of our kit like the Umbrous aspect, Siphoning Strikes, and Blended Poison Imbuement. And rolling both max level Barrage and Rapid Fire is still 5.6% more damage versus 3 levels on all core skills. I think overall it's worth losing the Shadow Clone damage and vulnerable damage on Grasp of Shadow. For the final stat, lucky hit chance, attack speed, or chance to slow unlucky hit all work fine depending on what you need. Only roll attack speed if you have near max rolls for your resource reduction and resource aspects. I personally think attack speed is already fast enough with the max accelerating on the crossbow, so I prefer Lucky Hit for the utility. Imitated Imbuement works really well instead of Grasp of Shadow. This is far more consistent, and also gives us a huge damage boost when we activate Shadow Clone. A technique you can use with Imitated Imbuement plus Preparation is to cast an Imbuement first and then Shadow Clone. Spam core skills and then cast the Imbuement again. The Imbuement we casted before Shadow Clone still gets copied by the Shadow Clone even though the Shadow Clone was casted afterwards. This makes it super easy to apply many stacks of Poison Imbuement onto bosses, or freezing a bunch of elites. Next, we're also aiming for 4 defensive stats on our pants. This is my most outdated piece, as I somehow can't find anything better. Umbra's Aspect is a free giveaway for a marksman-centric build. For the boots, I've introduced the Mangler's Aspect already. All stats and dexterity work fine here. But if you want to be more defensive, you can go for dodge rate instead. Also, one thing I want to mention is damage reduction or dodge rate versus distant enemies is fairly useful for us because we don't always close the distance for fights. 75% move speed bonus after dodging really helps us relocate or get out of danger. But running triple evade boots will make evading in combat much smoother. These boots are just rolled too well for me to run triple evade, and I'm fine with using the move speed bonus instead of more dodge charges. One more note is Penitent's boots are kind of mediocre for this build because oftentimes you're shooting at your enemies from a distance away. Many engagements are done with few enemies getting into Penitent's range. You will also have to drop the cheats aspect. My rings are fairly well rolled. Crit rate is the most important stat on the rings. However, what is even more important is rolling high on your aspects of the Umbral and Ravenous aspect. Without a max rolled Umbral and over 64% on your Ravenous aspect, you better have near max rolled energy reduction for both your necklace and boots. One thing to note is for the final version of the build, I don't actually suggest rolling resource generation onto your rings. A max rolled resource gen only contributes 1.48 energy per second. A max rolled Ravenous gives you 5.6 energy per second. And in combat, unless you're fighting a boss, this is very easy to keep up. This means that Ravenous is 3.78 times as powerful as the resource gen stat. Instead, you should definitely roll crit damage, vulnerable damage, or max life. Let's just say Ravenous is only twice as powerful, and not 3.78 times as powerful as resource generation, because we can't keep 100% uptime. That would still mean the 2 stats you saved from running Ravenous basically means that a replacement aspect must give you either 63% crit damage or 70.6% vulnerable damage to be as stat dense. Accelerating aspect on the weapon is absolutely crucial since it doubles accelerating aspect's power. This allows us to spam our twin cores smoothly with the crossbow. I imprinted rapid fire and Barrage's aspect on my melee weapons to help with AoE clear from more free bounces, which works well with the Imbuement. For the Paragon tree, let me just talk through some major points as it is very optimized. As you can see, this is quite the expansive Paragon tree, using a total of 7 boards if we include the starter board. We are utilizing a total of 6 glyphs and 2 legendary nodes, possibly 3, depending on your preference. At the end of my pathing, I am left with 5 extra Paragon points, which I put into these 2 dexterity and strength nodes, and 1 magic armor node. We are running more than the base requirements for chip, because we don't actually get a truckload of additive % damage increases from other sources if you have optimal gear. The marksman and chip are basically doing the same thing of buffing our core skill damage. The reason why we are using the bare minimum for many of these glyphs is to get the secondary bonuses. It is possible to take these 5 points out and path to Cheap Shot, gaining our 3rd legendary node. However, even if Cheap Shot is multiplicative, our build has a hard time sustaining many crowd-controlled enemies, when our main source of long-term crowd control is Frost Imbuement. I think the effectiveness is roughly the same. Cheap shots will be better when there are multiple crowd-controlled enemies, but investing the 5 points like I did makes your damage more consistent. We are also running Turf Glyph with minimum requirements for the 10% close damage reduction and more close damage. Despite being able to fight at a distance, there will always be close-ranged engagements. Exploit is a no-brainer for rogues. Vulnerable is very important, and this allows you to directly spam your skills into a bunch of mobs. Combat is a requirement for this build. We get a lot of damage from spamming our 2 core skills. Furthermore, it is a very efficient glyph for us to run because Poison Imbuement doesn't crit anyway, while we also need the 12% energy cost return to sustain our twin core rotations. As for the rare glyphs on the way, plenty of them are damage reduction or just useful offensive attributes like crit damage. Talking about rare glyphs, there is one last glyph to introduce. I am running the Diminish glyph on the Tricks of Trade tree. This is the best rare glyph node for us on the boards we're running, as larger elite packs are where we slow down the most, and we also buff our armor. There is one more decision you can make here. You can swap over to efficacy for faster clears if you're just farming. Swapping over to efficacy by swapping our strength investment for intelligence investment uses the same exact amount of Paragon points. The difference is their secondary bonus. Diminish reduces physical damage taken from vulnerable targets, while efficacy gives our imbuments a 20% boost. An important detail on the No Witness legendary node is that this works well as our final node, since before you get your full setup, you can't really maintain Shadow Clone easily. However, once you do, you easily cast Shadow Clone once per 20 seconds. This allows you to basically maintain a free 10% multiplicative damage bonus, and it appears that Shadow Clone does indeed get the 30% damage boost from our No Witness node as well, turning this into our strongest legendary node. Like and subscribe for more unique builds. If you want to support my work, please consider buying my fantasy novel or donating to my Patreon down below. With a book purchase, you can also request a topic from me, Chright, signing out.